My girlfriend has a secret OnlyFans account selling explicit content to our classmates and friends without my knowledge or consent. My name's Nick, 21M. I'm a senior in college, majoring in business, and up until a few days ago, I thought my life was pretty straightforward. I had a great girlfriend, Jess, 20F, who I'd been dating for over a year. Jess was the kind of girl that everyone noticed, and I'd always felt lucky to be with her. We met at a party, hit it off, and things moved fast from there. She was smart, confident, and had this mysterious edge that kept me hooked. But that mystery became a nightmare when I stumbled upon something I never thought possible. It started when I was hanging out with my buddies, scrolling through Reddit on my phone. I don't know what made me do it, but I searched up our college's name out of boredom. A thread caught my eye. Some guy was talking about how girls on campus had secret OnlyFans accounts and how he'd subscribed to a couple of them. I thought it was just some joke, but then I saw a screenshot. The username was cropped, but there was something about the background of the photo that looked familiar. I don't know why, but my gut was telling me to investigate. I didn't want to think Jess would be involved, but she'd been acting strange lately. She'd get all secretive about her phone, going out on study nights that seemed suspicious, and dodging any questions I had. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I created an anonymous OnlyFans account and paid to subscribe to the page linked in the thread. What I found left me speechless. The page loaded and there she was, Jess. The photos weren't exactly explicit, but they were way more revealing than anything I'd ever seen her post on Instagram. I clicked on a few more, and the images got worse. She was posing in lingerie, taking selfies in our apartment, the same bed we'd shared. I felt sick. I kept scrolling, my mind spinning, trying to convince myself this was some kind of horrible mistake. But then I saw her tattoo, a tiny, unique one on her hip that she'd gotten last summer. There was no denying it. It wasn't just the photos that hit me like a punch to the gut. There were comments from guys I knew, dudes I'd had classes with, guys I'd run into at parties. Some of them were even leaving tips and requests, practically throwing money at her. She responded to a few, calling them by name, like she knew them personally. It wasn't some anonymous thing. She was selling herself to people we saw every day, and they were paying for the privilege. My head was spinning, heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I needed to cool off first. I spent the night in my car, trying to figure out how I'd been so blind. I thought I knew her, thought I could trust her. But clearly, I was just another sucker who didn't see what was right in front of him. The next morning, I went back to the apartment. Jess was there, sitting on the couch, acting like nothing was wrong. She looked up and smiled, completely oblivious. I tried to keep my cool, but I couldn't help it. "Jess," I said, my voice shaking, "why didn't you tell me about the OnlyFans?" Her face went pale, and I saw her expression shift from shock to anger. She tried to play it off, saying it wasn't a big deal, that everyone was doing it these days. She claimed it was just a way to make extra money, that it was harmless. But it didn't feel harmless to me. She'd been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back, selling parts of herself to guys I knew. I felt betrayed, humiliated, like a fool for ever trusting her. I told her I needed some time to think, that I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine. She scoffed, rolling her eyes like I was overreacting, but I didn't care. I walked out of the apartment, my mind reeling, trying to process everything. I'd thought our relationship meant something, that we were building a future together. But now I wasn't sure what to believe. All I knew was that the girl I thought I loved wasn't who I thought she was. I spent the next few days crashing on my buddy Chris's, 22M, couch. Chris was the type of guy who had his life together. A solid job lined up after graduation, a steady girlfriend, and a clear sense of where he was going. I hadn't told him why I'd suddenly shown up with a duffel bag and a miserable look on my face, but he didn't press. He just handed me a beer and let me crash, and I was grateful for that. On the third night, though, I couldn't hold it in anymore. We were sitting around, watching TV, when Chris finally asked what was going on. I hesitated, but I needed to get it out, needed someone else to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I told him everything, about Jess, the OnlyFans account, the lies, the guys from our classes paying to see her. Chris listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each word. "Man, that's messed up," he said, shaking his head. "You need to get out of that situation. She's toxic." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief that someone else understood. But then he told me something that made my blood run cold. "Look, Nick, I didn't want to bring this up, but I've heard rumors about Jess for a while now. People have been talking. I didn't believe it, figured it was just college gossip. But well, I guess it wasn't just talk." He explained that some guys in our classes had joked about Jess and the kind of photos she'd send them. They'd made bets about how long it would take for her to break up with me and go for someone else. I felt a surge of anger, not just at Jess, but at myself for being so oblivious, for ignoring the signs and trusting her. Chris offered to help me move my stuff out of our apartment, and I agreed. I wasn't about to face Jess alone, not with everything I just learned. We drove over the next morning, and I felt a knot forming in my stomach as we walked up to the door. I could hear music playing inside, and the scent of her favorite candle wafted through the air, hitting me with a wave of memories. I hated how part of me still missed her even after everything she'd done. Jess was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone when we walked in. She looked up, her eyes narrowing when she saw Chris with me. I didn't give her a chance to speak. I told her I was moving out, that I'd had enough of her lies and manipulation. She looked taken aback, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize, try to make things right. But instead, she sneered. "Seriously, Nick? You're being a total baby about this. It's just photos. Everyone does it. I didn't think you'd be this insecure." Her words hit me like a slap. She didn't care, didn't feel an ounce of remorse. I realized then that she'd never respected me, that our entire relationship had been a game to her. I felt the last bit of my patience snap. "You were selling yourself to guys we know, Jess. Guys who look me in the eye and laugh behind my back. You lied to me, and now you're trying to act like I'm the one with the problem." She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "You're so dramatic. You knew I wanted more out of life. I'm just doing what I need to do to make it." I shook my head, grabbing the last of my things and heading for the door. Chris followed, his expression a mix of disgust and sympathy. As we left, Jess called out after me, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Good luck finding someone who'll put up with your fragile ego, Nick." I clenched my fists, resisting the urge to turn around and scream at her. But I kept walking, refusing to give her the satisfaction. She didn't deserve any more of my time, my energy. I was done. Over the next week, I tried to put the pieces of my life back together. I focused on my classes, kept my head down, and avoided the places where I might run into Jess or anyone associated with her. But rumors spread fast on campus, and it wasn't long before I started getting looks, hearing whispers as I passed by. Some people thought I was overreacting, that I should have supported her side hustle, while others took her side, painting me as the bitter, jealous ex. The worst part was running into guys who had paid for her content. They'd give me smug smiles, acting like they'd won some twisted game. It felt like my entire world was closing in on me, and I had no idea how to make it stop. One night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of Jess's OnlyFans page, and the message said, "Looks like you couldn't keep her happy, huh?" My hand shook as I read it, fury boiling in my veins. I felt humiliated, exposed, like my entire life had been turned into a spectacle for others to laugh at. I called Chris, barely able to keep my voice steady. "I need to do something. I can't just let her get away with this." He sighed, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "Nick, I get it. But be careful, man. This kind of stuff, it can spiral out of control." I knew he was right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed some kind of closure, some way to reclaim my dignity. I spent the next few days digging into Jess's OnlyFans page, searching for anything I could use to confront her, to make her understand the damage she caused. I wanted her to feel the same pain, the same humiliation that I was drowning in. I spent the next few days obsessed, spiraling deeper into a dark rabbit hole I'd never imagined myself in. Each day, I'd uncover something else that added fuel to the fire. I discovered Jess had been doing this for months, all while playing the role of my loyal girlfriend. She had hundreds of subscribers, and I saw familiar names among them. Guys we'd hung out with, people I considered friends. It had been pain to see parts of her she promised were only for me, and the betrayal burned like acid in my chest. Chris kept warning me to back off, to let it go, but I couldn't. I'd been humiliated, mocked, and reduced to a joke on our campus. Jess had painted me as the villain in her story, and people had started to believe it. They looked at me like I was some possessive jerk who couldn't handle his girlfriend's independence or ambition. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know what it felt like to be used, to be lied to every single day. Finally, I decided that if Jess wanted to play games, I'd give her a taste of her own medicine. I had dirt on her, enough to blow her world apart. So I started gathering everything, screenshots of her messages, the profiles of guys she flirted with, the most explicit photos I could find. It was risky, but I didn't care anymore. I wanted her to suffer, to feel the weight of her lies crushing down on her. One evening, I went back to our old apartment. I still had a key, and Jess was out for the night, probably working on her business, as she liked to call it. I let myself in, feeling a strange sense of adrenaline rushing through me as I moved around the apartment, looking for anything I could use. I went through her desk drawers, her laptop, her planner, anything that might give me more ammunition. And that's when I found it, a list of names, all in her handwriting. Next to each name, there were dates, amounts of money, and brief notes. Some were just initials, others were full names, and some had dollar signs scrawled next to them. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized what it was. These were her clients, the guys she'd sold herself to, some of them over and over again. This wasn't just an OnlyFans account. Jess had been meeting up with some of them, taking money to keep their dates off the record. My stomach twisted, and for a moment, I felt sick. I'd known she was capable of lying, but this was something else entirely. I took photos of the list with my phone, documenting everything. She built her little empire by using people, by using me. I was done being her pawn, her safety net, while she played her sick games. I stormed out of the apartment, my heart pounding, my mind racing with possibilities. She wanted me to look like the bad guy? Fine. I'd show her what that really looked like. Over the next few days, I started spreading rumors, letting snippets of the truth slip out here and there. I'd tell people that Jess was using her OnlyFans to manipulate and control her subscribers, that she'd built up a private client list and was essentially selling herself to the highest bidder. I watched as her reputation started to crumble, as people who once defended her began to question her integrity. And as her world began to unravel, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, a sense of control that I hadn't felt in months. Then came the big move. I anonymously sent the list of names and dates to the school administration. I knew they wouldn't ignore something like this, not with the possibility of their students being involved in a scandal that could reach the media. Within days, the university launched an investigation. Jess was called in for questioning, and I heard she'd been suspended from her classes while they looked into it. I didn't feel guilty, not in the slightest. She'd built this mess, and now she had to wade through it. A week later, Jess showed up at Chris's place. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I'd left, but seeing her standing there, with tears in her eyes and her hands shaking, was almost enough to make me pity her. Almost. "Nick," she started, her voice barely a whisper, "what did you do?" I stared at her, the anger and betrayal simmering just below the surface. "I did what you made me do, Jess. You used me, lied to me, and then expected me to just sit back and take it. You ruined your own life." She stepped closer, her expression shifting from hurt to fury. "You had no right. You think you can just destroy me because you can't handle what I do. You're pathetic, Nick." I laughed, shaking my head. Pathetic? Coming from the girl who faked a relationship to make money off our classmates? "You're the one who's pathetic, Jess, and now everyone knows it." She glared at me, her face twisting with rage. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you've ruined me? You're wrong, Nick. I'll bounce back from this, but you'll always be the guy who couldn't handle a real woman." I felt a flash of anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Good luck with that, Jess, but don't come crying to me when you realize you've burned every bridge you've ever had." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I'd done what I needed to do, but it hadn't brought me the satisfaction I'd hoped for. I'd taken her down, exposed her for what she really was, but at what cost? My life was still a mess, my reputation in shambles, and I was left wondering if revenge had been worth it at all. As I sat there, Chris gave me a look that was somewhere between admiration and concern. "You got what you wanted, man, but are you sure it was worth it?" I didn't answer him. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. The days following Jess's suspension were a whirlwind of chaos. Word of the scandal had spread like wildfire across campus. Everywhere I went, people stared, whispered, and exchanged knowing glances. I couldn't escape it, and neither could Jess. The university's investigation had gained traction, and soon enough, it wasn't just the students talking. Faculty and staff were buzzing with rumors too. I thought I'd be able to sit back and watch her world burn, but the reality wasn't as satisfying as I'd imagined. Chris and I started noticing that people weren't just blaming Jess. They were dragging my name into it too. People were saying that I'd known all along, that I'd been complicit, or worse, that I'd actually been the one encouraging her. The story had twisted, warped into something far darker and more insidious. Suddenly, I was being painted as the villain who'd orchestrated the entire thing, and the backlash was brutal. It wasn't just whispers and sideways glances anymore. Guys I'd never spoken to confronted me in the hallways, demanding to know if I'd profited off Jess's OnlyFans, if I'd been the mastermind behind her schemes. Some of them accused me of being part of her business, claiming I'd been setting her up with clients, making money off her. It was insane, but the rumors kept growing, feeding on themselves until I barely recognized the story they were telling. I started receiving threats, messages from anonymous numbers telling me to watch my back, to get out while I still could. One night, I came home to find my car vandalized, spray painted with the word pimp across the hood. The tires had been slashed, and I had no doubt who was behind it. Jess may have been suspended, but she still had her allies, people willing to do her dirty work. I destroyed her, but she wasn't going down alone. She was pulling me into the flames with her. The following day, I went to the campus administration, demanding they do something about the harassment I was facing. But they brushed me off, saying they were handling it as best they could. Apparently, Jess had twisted the story to make herself the victim, claiming I'd coerced her into making the account in the first place. She'd said I'd pressured her, controlled her, and used her for my own gain. And somehow she convinced enough people that now I was the one under investigation. I felt trapped, like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The more I tried to defend myself, the more people seemed to turn against me. My professors started treating me differently, barely acknowledging me in class. Friends I'd known for years suddenly stopped answering my texts, avoiding me on campus. I was becoming a pariah, ostracized for something I hadn't done. It was as if the entire university had turned against me, and I had no idea how to fight back. One night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I got a message from Jess. She'd been silent for days, and I hadn't expected to hear from her, especially not after everything that had happened. But there it was, a single text message lighting up my screen. Let's talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We arranged to meet in a secluded spot on campus, away from prying eyes. I didn't trust her, but I needed answers, needed to know why she'd done this, why she dragged me into her mess. I arrived early, my mind racing with a mix of anger and anticipation. When she finally showed up, she looked different. Her usual confidence replaced by a tense, almost nervous energy. She stood there for a moment, staring at me before speaking. "This is your fault, you know," she said, her voice trembling. "If you hadn't snooped, if you hadn't tried to ruin me, none of this would have happened." I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "My fault? You're the one who lied, who used me, who sold yourself to everyone we know. Don't act like I forced you into this, Jess. You did this to yourself." She stepped closer, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You don't get it, do you? I needed that money. I didn't have a choice. You think I wanted to hurt you? I was just trying to survive." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream. "Survive? You've ruined my life, Jess. I'm the one being investigated now. I'm the one who's lost everything. And for what? So you can make a few bucks off a bunch of idiots who can't keep it in their pants." She flinched, and for a moment I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. "You made this mess, Nick. You're the one who couldn't just leave well enough alone. I tried to help you, to get you to understand, but you're too blinded by your own pride to see it." "Help me?" I spat, the words dripping with sarcasm. "You call lying and manipulating me helping? You're delusional, Jess. You've lost touch with reality." She took a step back, crossing her arms defensively. "Believe whatever you want, Nick, but don't think for a second that I'm going down without a fight. I've already started talking to the administration, told them everything. By the time I'm done, they'll believe I was the victim, and you'll be the one left with nothing." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized then that she'd planned this, that she'd orchestrated every part of it. She turned the tables on me, painting herself as the wronged party, manipulating the system to her advantage. And I was powerless to stop her. As she walked away, I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. She'd won. She'd taken everything from me, my friends, my reputation, my sense of security. And now she was going to walk away from it all, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life she'd destroyed. I stood there, alone in the darkness, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. I'd wanted revenge, but in the end, I'd only destroyed myself. Jess had used my anger, my desperation, and turned it against me, leaving me with nothing but a hollow sense of defeat. And as I walked back to my apartment, the realization hit me. This was just the beginning. Jess wasn't done with me yet, and I had no idea what else she had in store. The days following my last encounter with Jess were a blur. Every morning, I'd wake up with a sinking feeling, knowing that things were only getting worse. My life was crumbling faster than I could comprehend. The university had formally launched an investigation into me, and my reputation was beyond repair. Every time I walked through campus, I felt like everyone's eyes were on me, judging, whispering, condemning. I'd become public enemy number one, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. One evening, just when I thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, I received an email from the administration. They were officially suspending me from campus until the investigation was over. The message was cold, detached, and final. There was no room for explanation or defense. Just like that, everything I'd worked for, the classes, the friendships, the future I'd envisioned, was stripped away. Anger boiled inside me. I couldn't let Jess win. She had taken everything from me, left me with nothing but the ruins of a life I could barely recognize. I needed to do something, anything, to take back control. I spent hours poring over old text messages, emails, anything that might prove her involvement, but it all felt like grasping at straws. Jess had covered her tracks too well, leaving me with nothing but circumstantial evidence and a tarnished reputation. In a moment of desperation, I reached out to Chris. He was the last person I trusted, the only one who hadn't turned his back on me. I told him everything, laying out the twisted tale of betrayal, manipulation, and lies. He listened in silence, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. When I was done, he nodded, his expression hardening with a resolve I hadn't seen before. "We can't let her get away with this," he said, his voice low and determined. "If she wants a war, then we'll give her one." Chris suggested that we confront her, force her to admit the truth. I was hesitant at first, but I knew he was right. We needed to put an end to this once and for all. Together, we planned a final showdown, a confrontation that would bring everything to light. I didn't know if it would work, but it was the only option I had left. We tracked her down to a coffee shop near campus, where she'd been meeting with a few of her remaining allies. She was laughing, carefree, as if the chaos she'd caused hadn't affected her in the slightest. The sight of her sitting there, smiling as though she hadn't just destroyed my life, filled me with a white-hot rage. Chris and I approached her table, and she looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to amusement. "Well, well," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Come to grovel, Nick? Or is this some kind of pathetic attempt at redemption?" I ignored her taunts, clenching my fists as I spoke. "Jess, you've lied, manipulated, and dragged me through hell. But it ends now. You're going to tell everyone the truth, or I'll make sure they find out." She raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "The truth? What truth, Nick? That you pressured me, that you forced me into things I didn't want to do? Go ahead, tell them your version. I'm sure they'll believe you over me." Chris stepped forward, his voice sharp and biting. "We know everything, Jess. The OnlyFans account, the lies you've been spreading, the manipulation. This isn't just about Nick anymore. This is about you being a sociopath who'll do anything to get what she wants." Jess's face darkened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. But she quickly composed herself, laughing softly. "You two really think you can scare me? You're nothing but a couple of losers who can't handle the fact that I'm smarter than you. Face it, Nick, you were nothing but a stepping stone, someone to use and discard. And now that I'm done with you, you're nothing." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I refused to let her see the impact. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "You might be able to fool the administration, Jess, but the truth has a way of coming out. People will see you for who you really are. You can't hide forever." She smirked, leaning in close enough that I could smell her perfume. "You're right, Nick. I can't hide forever. But I don't have to. I've already won. You're finished here. Your friends, your reputation, your future, it's all gone, and there's nothing you can do about it." With that, she stood up, tossing her hair over her shoulder as she walked away, leaving me and Chris standing there, stunned and defeated. She'd stripped me of everything, reduced me to a shadow of the person I'd once been. And as she disappeared into the crowd, I realized the horrifying truth. I'd lost. Jess had taken everything from me, and I was powerless to stop her. The next few days were a blur of isolation and despair. I'd been suspended from campus, abandoned by my friends, and left with nothing but the empty shell of a life I'd once known. I spent hours scrolling through old photos, memories of a time when things had made sense, when I believed in a future that now felt like a distant dream. And then, one morning, I woke up to find a new message in my inbox. It was from Jess. She'd sent a video, a final taunt, a reminder of everything she'd taken from me. I opened it, my heart pounding as the screen filled with her face, a wicked smile twisting her lips. "Congratulations, Nick," she said, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "You've been a worthy opponent, but it's time to face the truth. I've won. You're nothing, and you always will be. Goodbye." The video ended, and I stared at the screen, numb and hollow. I'd lost everything: my dignity, my reputation, my future. Jess had destroyed me, leaving me with nothing but the ashes of a life I'd once cherished. And as I sat there, alone in the darkness, I realized the bitter truth: some battles can't be won, and some monsters are too powerful to defeat. In the end, I was just another casualty in Jess's twisted game, a pawn sacrificed in the pursuit of her own selfish ambitions. And as the reality of my defeat sank in, I knew there was no going back. Jess had won, and there was nothing left for me but the haunting memories of a life I'd lost.